Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the recent military conflict that broke out between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Now you might be sitting there thinking, really? Does anybody know where Azerbaijan and Armenia is? Can anybody spell Azerbaijan? Who cares about what's happening in that part of the world? But I want to tell you that this is actually a really fascinating story, because these two countries were both previously part of the old Soviet Union. So they became independent around 1991 when we saw the breakup of the old Soviet Union. And as part of that breakup, an area of land was officially designated as being part of Azerbaijan, but it's predominantly occupied by people from Armenia. And as you'll know, all across the world, when we have situations like that, there is always conflict. If one country claims that it owns an area, but another country is saying that its people live there, then that causes problems. And in fact, if you look at what's going on in Ukraine right now, that's exactly what Russia have claimed. President Putin claimed that the areas of Ukraine that they've invaded are predominantly occupied by Russians, and that those Russians are being persecuted by Ukrainians, and he referred to them as Nazis. He wanted to denazify the area. That's one of the rationales for why they made the invasion. But anyway, getting back to Armenia and Azerbaijan, this problem has been going on for a long period of time. And over the course of the last 30 years, there have actually been two wars between these two countries, one of which went on for a number of years and resulted in over 30,000 fatalities. And the issue that we've got here is that Russia has actually been backing Armenia. They've been supporting the people who live in this part of Azerbaijan. And Turkey, which has an affiliation with Azerbaijan, it's the same religious and ethnic background, has been supporting Azerbaijan. And of course, this isn't the first time that Russia and Turkey have found themselves on the opposite sides of military conflicts. That's happening in Libya and Syria currently. So over the course of the last 30 years, we've had a lot of tension around this region. And Russia actually brokered a peacekeeping deal. It's reported that they have around 2,000 peacekeepers in the region to try to maintain a balance and keep the peace. However, over the course of the last few days, Azerbaijan decided that it wanted to launch a military attack to try to retake the area completely. Now, in the past, what's happened here is that Russia has stepped up and supported Armenia. But obviously, Russia is currently preoccupied by what's going on in Ukraine. So in today's video, what I want to do is go through the background on this conflict. We'll have a very brief look at Armenia and Azerbaijan, because we haven't covered those two countries on the channel before. We'll look at the previous wars. We'll look at what's going on right now. And then we'll talk about the peacekeeping settlement. And I think what's really fascinating here is Russia's approach. So let's have a quick look at what the Russian official statement was with regards to this conflict.
Russia, one of the backers of the ceasefire, has urged the two countries to stop the fighting.
Russia strongly encourages the conflicting sides to stop the bloodshed, stop the military actions at once, and return to a political and diplomatic settlement.
So the official advice from Russia is to stop the bloodshed, stop the fighting, and to get around the table and talk about this like grown-ups. What a shame that Russia doesn't listen to that advice with regards to what's happening in Ukraine. If it did, then we wouldn't have had the last 18 months of war that we've had in Ukraine. But anyway, that issue aside, in today's video, we'll talk about the peacekeeping deal that has now been brokered. And heads up, spoiler alert, this is a complete embarrassment for Russia. So we'll get onto that later in the video, as well as my summary as to why I think this situation has arisen and what the implications of this are in a wider context for Russia. But before we get started on all of that, I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody that supported me recently, sent me messages of support about being back on camera. As you can see, I'm back in the Joe Blog studio. We've got the sign, we've got the statues, and of course, the checked shirt, which always goes down well. And if you'd like to see more face-to-face videos like this, including videos that aren't being posted on YouTube, and also you'd like to avoid the annoying adverts that come on repeatedly during my videos, then please check out my Patreon channel, where you'll find a lot of unique content and an ad-free service. But if you don't like Patreon or you don't want to do that, then please have a look in the description below if you'd like to support the channel, and you'll find links there to buymeacoffee.com, as well as YouTube's super thanks and membership scheme. Azerbaijan and Armenia were both formerly part of the Soviet Union, however have been independent since the early 1990s. Azerbaijan is the largest of the two countries, with a population of around 10.4 million people. The country has a large coastline on the Caspian Sea and has boundaries to the north with Russia, to the south with Iran, to the west with Armenia, and the northwest with Georgia. In terms of natural resources, Azerbaijan has both oil and natural gas and exports both of these valuable commodities. And its biggest export markets are Italy and Turkey, who buy large quantities of natural gas from the area. Armenia is a landlocked country that has a population of around 2.8 million people and has borders to the north and the east with Georgia and Azerbaijan, and to the south and west with Iran and Turkey. Armenia also has a border to the west with Nakhchivan, which is a republic which is officially affiliated to Azerbaijan, so effectively it's part of Azerbaijan. Armenia does not have significant natural resources and is therefore a net importer. The main dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan is the region known as NOGORNO-KARABAKH, which is an area that's officially designated as being part of Azerbaijan, but is predominantly occupied by Armenians.
Nagorno-Karabakh is at the center of the conflict. It's a mountainous region within Azerbaijan and is internationally recognized as part of it. But it's known as Artsakh by Armenians, and its 120,000 inhabitants are predominantly ethnic Armenians. They have their own government, which is close to Armenia, but not officially recognized by it or any other country. Armenians, who are Christians, claim a presence in the area dating back several centuries before Christ. Azerbaijan, whose inhabitants are mostly Turkic Muslims, also claim deep historical ties. Bloody conflict between the two peoples goes back more than a century. Armenia and Azerbaijan were both members of the Soviet Union, and in the 3 decades since its collapse, they've already fought 2 wars. One that took place between 1988 and 1994, and a second that lasted 44 days in 2020. Over the course of the 2 wars, tens of thousands died. In the first war, over 1 million people were displaced. Most of those were Azeris, driven from their homes when Armenia ended up with control over Nagorno-Karabakh. In the second, Azerbaijan managed to take back a third of Nagorno-Karabakh. Russia brokered a ceasefire between the two, providing peacekeepers to guard the Lachin Corridor, a crucial road that connects the territory to Armenia. Tensions started ratcheting up again when a group of Azerbaijani civilians, identifying themselves as environmental activists, began blocking the Lachin Corridor. An Azerbaijan checkpoint was set up, blocking the flow of goods to Armenia. It caused what the US called a rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation. Azerbaijan launched military action in the Nagorno-Karabakh region on Tuesday, a move that could foreshadow a new war. It says it did so to drive out what it claims are Armenian troops.
Gunfire and fear. On the streets of Stepanakert, the main city in Nagorno-Karabakh, panic took over as mortars pounded its surroundings. This ethnic Armenian-dominated enclave and self-declared breakaway territory is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but it is controlled by ethnic Armenians and has close links to the Armenian government. Outside the Armenian parliament in Yerevan, crowds gathered to protest against the renewed military operations, urging the government to do more to protect the people in Nagorno-Karabakh, as once again, the tension between the two countries spills over into conflict.
Following the request from Russia to cease the bloodshed and stop fighting, Azerbaijan have announced that it's halted military action and agreed to a ceasefire. Separatists running the self-styled Republic of Artsakh said they'd been forced to agree to Azerbaijan's terms, relayed by Russian peacekeepers, after Azerbaijan's army broke through their lines and seized a number of strategic locations while the world did nothing. The authorities of the Republic of Artsakh accept the proposal from the command of the Russian peacekeeping contingent to cease fire, they said in a statement. Azerbaijan said that it could no longer tolerate a situation it regarded as a threat to its security and territorial sovereignty. The formal surrender of separatist fighters and the handover of their weapons and hardware was expected to take place on Wednesday the 20th of September. Armenia, which says it has no military forces in the Karabakh area despite Azerbaijani assertions, did not intervene militarily. Russia's defense ministry, which has thousands of peacekeepers on the ground, broadcast footage of Karabakh Armenians being given temporary shelter at a makeshift Russian military facility. Under the agreement confirmed by both sides and effective from 1 p.m. on Wednesday the 20th of September, separatist forces will disband and disarm, and talks on the future of the region and the ethnic Armenians who live there will start on Thursday the 21st of September. Karabakh, a mountainous area in the volatile wider South Caucasus region, is internationally recognised as Azerbaijani territory, but part of it has been run by separatist Armenian authorities who say the area is their ancestral homeland. Fearful of what the future might hold, crowds of ethnic Armenians made their way to the airport in Karabakh, whilst others took shelter with Russian peacekeepers. Azerbaijan has said that it plans to integrate the area's 120,000 ethnic Armenians and that their rights would be protected under the constitution. But some Armenians, given the fact that the region has seen 2 wars since the 1991 Soviet fall, are sceptical, and neighbouring Armenia has accused Azerbaijan of trying to ethnically cleanse the territory, something which Azerbaijan denies. The outcome, a military victory for Turkey-backed Azerbaijan, whose forces far outnumbered the separatists, could cause political turmoil in neighbouring Armenia, where some political forces are angry that more was not done to protect the Karabakh Armenians. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan was already facing calls from some opponents to resign. Some Armenians are also furious that Russia, which has peacekeepers on the ground and helped broker an earlier ceasefire deal in 2020 following a 44-day war, was unable to stop Azerbaijan. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video firstly because I think it's interesting to keep across everything that's going on in the world. And a military conflict in Azerbaijan probably isn't something that you'll be looking up when you get out of bed first thing in the morning. You may not know where Azerbaijan or Armenia are actually located or even how to spell them, but I think it's good to give everybody the information and give you some more background as to why there is a military conflict, how this has arisen, and why it's difficult to actually get to a resolution that everybody's happy with. Because when you look at situations like this, and there are many of them all across the world, it's really difficult to get a common ground. Because one group has a very strong view that they deserve to live in that area, and another group has a very strong view that they own that area. And it's obviously very difficult when you're talking about politics and history and often religion for people to be able to concede their ground. And what we've seen in today's video is that this dispute has been going on for a long period of time, much longer than the 30 years since the breakup of the Soviet Union. Claims on who should be living in this region and who owns the heritage date back for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So it's very difficult to get a resolution when you've got a situation like that. But over the course of the last 30 years, what we've seen is that the two sides have been supported financially and from a military perspective by two big players. Despite the fact that Russia is a neighbour of Azerbaijan, they've actually been supporting the Armenians. So they've been providing financial assistance and military support. And Turkey, who have a very close affinity to Azerbaijan in terms of heritage, ethnicity and religion, have been providing military and financial support. And as I mentioned right at the start of the video, this isn't the first time that Russia and Turkey have found themselves on opposing sides. In fact, we've got ongoing situations in both Libya and Syria right now. But what we've seen in this recent conflict is absolutely fascinating. Now, as you saw in the video, there have been two wars previously in this area, and both of those wars were brought to a conclusion by Russia, who got everybody around the table and agreed a deal. But the undercurrent behind both of those arrangements was that Russia was standing behind Armenia, so the Armenian rights were being upheld. However, the latest situation is very different. As you'll be fully aware, Russia is financially stretched at the moment. The economy is under real pressure and it's spending an absolute fortune on maintaining the war effort in Ukraine. And actually, President Putin has come out and stated that Russia has an unlimited budget when it comes to the war in Ukraine. They will spend whatever it takes to win that fight. But the problem that's causing Russia is that they're running out of cash and they're having to cut back in other areas. And supporting Armenia is clearly an area where they can't afford to get involved right now. In the previous two conflicts, Russia was fully prepared to back Armenia. However, right now, it doesn't have the resources either financially or from a military perspective to be able to do that. So when Azerbaijan invaded the area, Russia didn't really have much option but to ask everybody to down their weapons and to get around the table. They were not prepared this time to back up Armenia. And this is a real wake-up call for Russia and President Putin. What's going on in Ukraine is obviously a big show of strength. Russia are flexing their muscles and showing what military prowess they have. However, by focusing solely on Ukraine, it means that Russia is vulnerable in other areas where it's been supporting other nations. And what we've seen happen in Azerbaijan is that the forces that were previously backed by Russia have lost that fight. They've had to throw the towel in very quickly because there was no longer any support coming directly from Moscow. And it'll be fascinating to see over the course of the next 3 to 6 to 12 months whether or not there are other conflicts that Russia have been supporting sides in where it suddenly fires up again and Russia finds themselves in a position where they're not able to provide either the financial or military support and therefore they lose those battles. And that, it represents a real problem for Russia because Russia has been trying to build its presence all across the globe ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991. But by focusing all of its time and effort and finances into Ukraine, it may well find that it's now vulnerable to military action against it in other areas of the world. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments on this or any related stories. Hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end. And here's something to put a smile on your face.